Some loves don't end because we stop trying. They end because time quietly changes the people we used to be. And if you've ever looked at someone and thought, I still love you, but I don't know how to live beside you anymore, then stay with me. Because this story isn't about betrayal. It isn't about hate. It's about a love that was real and still didn't survive time. I used to think love was supposed to be strong enough to defeat anything. Distance, stress, growing pains. I thought if two people loved each other sincerely, they would always find a way. But no one tells you this part. Sometimes love isn't what breaks. Sometimes it's the space between two versions of you that grows wider until it becomes a whole ocean. Let me tell you how it happened. At the beginning, it wasn't dramatic. It was small, quiet, warm. We didn't fall in love in a single moment. We accumulated love. A shared joke that kept returning like a familiar song. A hand on the back when crossing a street. A text me when you get home that felt like being carried. You knew my silences. I knew your tired eyes. And we didn't need much to feel okay. Just a little time together. Just the sense that someone in this world was truly on my side. Back then, I didn't notice time moving, because time was gentle. We made plans that sounded like forever, not because we promised, but because we believed. The first change didn't arrive like a storm. It arrived like a season. One day, your laughter was still there, but it took longer to reach it. One day, I started explaining things I never had to explain before. And then there were days where we were together, but it didn't feel like we were with each other. You'd talk, and I'd nod. I'd talk, and you'd smile. We were polite. We were kind. And somehow, that was the most terrifying part. Because if someone screams at you, you know where you stand. But when love becomes quiet in the wrong way, you start doubting your own feelings. You start asking questions like, am I too sensitive? Is it just a phase? Maybe I'm the problem. We didn't fight much, and I used to think that meant we were okay. But sometimes, not fighting is just two people learning how to avoid the truth. The hardest thing wasn't that we changed. People are supposed to change. The hardest thing was realizing we changed in different directions. You started wanting stability. I started wanting freedom. You wanted quiet. I wanted more life. And neither of us was wrong. But love doesn't survive on not wrong. Love survives on meeting each other. At first we tried. We really did. We compromised in small ways. We adjusted our schedules. We apologized more. We promised we'd do better. And for a while, it almost worked. But then time kept going. and it kept asking us to become more ourselves. And that's when the cracks became visible. I remember one night we were sitting in the same room, under the same light, and I suddenly felt alone. Not because you weren't there, but because the version of you I knew was no longer sitting across from me. It was still your face, still your voice, but the feeling, the familiar feeling, was fading. And that scared me more than any breakup ever could. There was a moment, not dramatic, not loud, but it landed in my chest like a truth I couldn't unlearn. We were talking about something small, something ordinary, and you said a sentence, a normal sentence, but it sounded like a stranger speaking through someone I loved. I looked at you, and my mind tried to pull up all our memories like proof, all the laughter, all the tears, all the "we'll be fine," but my body already knew. It knew the distance had become permanent. It knew we were holding on to something that no longer fit the people we were becoming, and I hated myself for knowing. Because how do you accept a truth like that when you still love someone? That's the cruelest part of this kind of ending. You don't stop loving. You just stop surviving. When love doesn't survive time, the goodbye often begins long before the last conversation. It begins when you stop telling them little things, not because you don't want to, but because it doesn't feel like it lands anymore. It begins when you laugh with friends and suddenly realize you haven't laughed like that at home in a while. It begins when you start imagining a future and they aren't in it. And instead of feeling guilty, you feel relief. Relief is a brutal emotion when you're still trying to be loyal, but relief is honest. And one day we sat down, and we finally said what we'd been avoiding. We didn't accuse, we didn't shout, we just looked at each other with that tired kindness that only comes when two people have tried their best. And you said something like, "I don't know how to reach you anymore." And I wanted to say, "Just try harder." But I didn't, because I knew we had been trying. Time just kept pulling us into different lives. If I could go back to that last night, I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't bargain. I wouldn't promise to become someone else. I would simply say I loved you, not in a shallow way, not in a temporary way. I loved you in the way that changes a person's nervous system, in the way that makes ordinary days feel safer. And I'm sorry that love wasn't enough to stop time. I'm sorry we couldn't grow in the same direction. I'm sorry the version of us that made sense became a memory. But I want you to know you didn't fail, and neither did I. We were just two people who met at the right time, and then lived long enough to meet ourselves again, and that is sometimes the saddest kind of love, not because it wasn't real, but because it was. After something like this ends, people expect you to move on the normal way. They think if there's no betrayal, it should hurt less. But that's not how grief works. Because you're not just losing a person, you're losing a timeline, a future that lived in your head, a home you imagined, a version of yourself that only existed beside them, and you mourn in strange ways. You hear a song and your chest tightens. You pass a place and feel a phantom warmth. You almost text them something silly, and then remember there's no us to send it to anymore. It's quiet grief, the kind people don't see, and it makes you wonder, if love was real, why didn't it last? But maybe the question isn't why didn't it last? Maybe the question is, what did it teach me while it lived? Because some loves are not built to be permanent. Some loves are built to make you softer, braver, more honest. Some loves are chapters, and chapters end even when the book was beautiful. There's a kind of peace that comes much later, not the peace of forgetting, not the peace of pretending it didn't matter, but the peace of admitting it mattered and it ended, and both can be true. Sometimes I still think of you, not with bitterness, not with longing that destroys me, just softly, like touching an old scar and remembering you survived. And if you're listening to this while missing someone whose love didn't survive time, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not unlovable because something ended. You are not foolish for loving something that didn't last. And you are not broken because you still feel it. You are simply human, and you loved. One day you'll wake up and realize you can breathe without the weight. It won't happen all at once. It will happen the way healing always happens. Quietly, in the way you laugh without checking your phone afterward, in the way you make a plan and don't feel guilty, in the way your heart learns that safety can be rebuilt. And when that day comes, I hope you don't call your love a failure. I hope you call it what it was, a love that was real, a love that changed you, a love that didn't survive time, but still left something gentle behind. If you're still here with me, thank you. Tonight, let your heart rest. You don't have to force closure. You don't have to rush healing. Just breathe and let time, this time, be kind to you.